we're an animal, aren't we? Would you agree?
Yeah.
The human, we're an animal.
Yeah.
And we seem to be placed in an environmental context that is vastly different from the majority of evolution.
Right.
So one of the things that we've already touched on, I think, is we're tribal. So it seems when you look into it, maybe we're good at having relationships, let's say 100 people. It's not much more than that, it seems.
Right.
So what happens to, and you mentioned overstimulated, maybe that might be where it's going. What happens when you have social media following and influence and, we're talking thousands, tens of thousands, sometimes millions.
Yeah.
And those followers, your extended tribe, air quotes, have the capacity to comment and pass judgment, like, love,
Right.
haters back off, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
What do you think that does to...
It's really dangerous. It's really dangerous for your brain. So one of the things that changes in your brain, right, with social media is your dopamine and your dopamine receptor. So social media is one of those things. It's like any other type of substance that can be addictive, right? Like you start having that substance, whether it's drugs or social media, and your brain feels happy with it. So you want more of it. And one of the things that's really interesting is Instagram in particular. As people like things on Instagram, Instagram doesn't just give you those likes all at once, because what they realized is as the likes trickle in and you see them trickle, you have a happy response, but it's a little happy. But if you get a ton of likes all at once, that really affects your dopamine, right? And increases your dopamine. So they actually will save it so that you get a lot of likes all at once, and that becomes more addictive. So it's scary.
Yeah. So you touched on dopamine, and let's go back to being a parent for a second, but it of course it applies to me, in my life and the clients that we see. Another one of those ongoing, let's call it a battle that we choose to have with children, is sugar.
Right.
Processed food.
It's the same kind of thing. Right?
Yeah, exactly. So that leads us to addiction. Can we start this conversation on addiction would you give a definition on what you would say addiction is?
That's another hard one, because addiction means different things to different people.
And different levels of addiction sharing?
Would mean, in very simple terms, what I would say with addiction is you can't function well without it.
Yeah.
Right? And there are some people like that with social media, with sugar, with drugs, with alcohol, right?
Yeah.
Whatever it is, that becomes such an important part of your life that it's overtaking.
Yeah.
Right? And that's how social media can be for some people.
So looking at that, maybe one way to get an understanding if you are indeed addicted is to have that period of detoxification. Let's just say if it was, pick any of those substances that you just said, but let's just stay on the topic of social media. If I was to say to, my kids may be a little bit young, but let's just say to anyone, it doesn't even have to be an age demographic. Let's say if you were to say to someone, okay, let's see if there is addictive behaviour. So if you can't do this, and if you continue to this, an addiction seems to be negative, doesn't it? We don't often use addiction in a positive term. Right. It usually seems to be negative. So it has a negative effect on your life. Would one way, as an individual who is, I'm not addicted to social media, if you were to say, okay, put your phone away or do not use social media for a week and let's just see what comes up.
Right.
And if there is an addiction or the beginnings of an addiction or well into an addiction, what could you expect would come up?
Well, actually, do you remember in the movie that they addressed that with the girl? Do you remember at the dinner table they tried to take her phone away?
Oh, that's right, and she smashed the thing. Yeah.
Right, she couldn't stand it. She heard the dings, she couldn't stand it, right? So someone who was addicted wouldn't make it a week.
Yeah.
And they would start feeling really bad, right? Because, again, the elevated levels of dopamine that you're getting from the likes or the interaction on social media isn't happening anymore. Right? And so your brain has been rewired to need different levels of dopamine to reach the same level of happiness. That's the problem, right? And you take that away, and whereas before you were addicted to social media, that dopamine level down here may have been okay. Now it's been raised up here, right? And you're not getting that anymore.
So there's a new baseline.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Right. And what's also scary about that is it's all kind of mixed together, right? Like, so if you're online more, you're not outside exercising or whatever it is, just any type of movement, which also drives your endorphins and your levels of dopamine. So now you're not getting that, but you're online and you're getting it from a different way, and now you're not getting either, right? So you're going to feel really bad.
And just, I'm curious, let's stay with sugar and social media.
Yeah.
Has there ever been cases where, you know, the methadone program, we remove heroin and we bring in methadone because we believe it's a better, maybe it's a better addiction. I'm not sure if that's the right word, but it's certainly a better alternative than heroin. If you have someone that you've given a 1 week, let's say I'm just choosing a rudimentary period of time, a 1 week digital detox, has there often been cases where those people will go for more sugar? Like they're like, okay, I'm not using...
That's so interesting.
Is that...
I don't know the answer to that, but it would make sense, actually.
Yeah, I wonder.
It would make sense that they do. One of the other things that I think is really interesting, to your point here about social media, is so apparently, like in the real world, people talk about themselves 30 to 40% of the time that they're talking. And we also get dopamine hits from that, from talking about ourselves. On social media, people are talking about themselves 80% of the time. And that's why they feel so happy about it, because it's just a platform for them to talk about themselves. So I think as people learn more about this, maybe that's something else that you can look at. Like, okay, so you're not using social media. Are you having more sugar? Or can you find another platform to talk about yourself? Or maybe that's why going to therapy is a good idea, because that's another platform. So I think this is not something we know enough about yet, to your point, right? Yeah. It's pretty new. So yeah, it should be interesting. So it unfolds, right? So
from a strategy, let's just say we are going through, I don't know, that digital detox for whatever period of time. And then looking at, you know, when, through movies and through documentaries, you see when people go cold turkey. Yeah. There seems to be a really violent reaction if someone's, well, and I guess go back to the film, the girl smashed the thing. Yeah. So if you're a parent, let's just stay with parent, and then you believe that your child is over-consuming social media or over-consuming on technology, and you say, okay, I'm going to take that authoritarian perspective and I'm going to remove social media from you for 3 days. Let's say, what's a good step for the parent? They've got to be there, I imagine. Like if I'm working for 3 days and I say, sorry kids, no more, and I'm taking the phones with me and I'm leaving my kids without support. I'm sure they must need support and compassion to help them. Well, what would be a good strategy there?
Well, that's interesting. So if you think about social media as an addiction, and if you're taking it away from your child because you think they're addicted, taking it away cold turkey is probably not a great idea, right? Like you probably want to do it in an easier way. And also this is where, so I'm sure you know about cognitive behavioral therapy, right? It's kind of the most common form of therapy that people think is like, well, most evidence-based for pretty much everything.
Can you please expand on it just quickly and then we'll come back to the point?
Sure. So in very simple terms, it's about questioning, asking yourself questions about your thoughts. So, because we have thoughts, we believe them, right? But they're not always true, right? So you feel a certain way, and then and you or someone else would ask yourself, okay, so this is how you feel, but let's look at that. Is that really true? You know, is this really the only option? Is that really true about yourself? And so it's teaching yourself to do that, right? Like for example, in terms of kids, right? Like let's say your kid is at school and they think there's a group of girls laughing at them because they keep looking over at her. Maybe there's a clock behind her head. Yeah. Maybe they're not looking at her at all. They're laughing about something else and looking at the time, right? So that's like a very basic form of cognitive behavioral therapy. But that would be like trying to take that approach with kids that you feel are addicted to social media, like trying to understand why. What has happened? Why do they feel the need to look at it? What do they feel that they're getting from it? They feel that they're keeping up with their friends? Okay, is that true? Because what your friends are putting on social media, is that really what's going on in their lives? You know, so I would say before you just take something away like that, try and get a little more to the root of it. What's going on? What they're getting from it? What they need? And what can you replace it with? So it's not just cold turkey.
Well, I'm sure that's where a therapist such as yourself really helps.